Hi, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 48, where a little late to the game, we're getting into a genre that I feel like, we should have talked about sooner. We're doing signal wave and broken transmissions.
We've talked about signal wave before.
Yeah, but it hasn't really gotten its own episode, I guess is what I was getting towards. Yeah, because even with one of these bands, one of the two albums.
Yeah.
They've been on the show before, but we never really talked about it, like even in a little bit of detail. So I was kind of excited.
Okay. Yeah. No, I am too. Yeah. Signal wave is a real interesting genre for me because conceptually I do like it, but I've actually tried to find other signal wave artists that I could get into. And it's just, God, there's a lot of signal wave out there that I just cannot get into. It's just, like both the albums today are like, for me, it was like finally some good fucking signal wave.
Finally some good fucking signal wave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I probably know why that is, but probably to get into it first, just give a quick, definition. So signal wave is a subgenre of vaporwave, sometimes called broken transmissions, which I think is what we refer to it as in the trailer, right? It's one of the genres we talk about in the trailer we did for the show, not 3 years ago at this point or whatever. Ooh, I don't like that. Don't like that. Anyway, signal wave really is about creating like a simulation of a broadcast. So less of like, this is an album of music I've put together in some fashion, whether it's composed or plunderphonics or whatever, but it's about simulating a space, and that space is sort of being trapped in broadcast media.
Yeah.
Sort of like less concrete than like MallSoft, which is like, oh, I'm trapped in a mall. Now I have to buy a bunch of stuff while some light funk plays in the background. This is much more of like, I'm trapped in post-modernity malaise channel surfing at midnight. And this is what's playing in front of me. So a lot of heavy distortion, statics, plunderphonics driven samples. Those samples tend to, like MallSoft, kind of be consumerism based. They to be ads. So like one of the first samples we ever played on the show was the Chanel No. 5 sample of like, it's Chanel, it's Chanel, it's Chanel, over and over again. So it's that type of stuff. And what's interesting listening to these is that on both these albums is that's not really as present in these. There's less like overt advertising stuff sample. It's not like TV samples or radio samples or, commercial samples. It's very different.
It's very different. I would say, signal wave is like I said, a subgenre of vaporwave with a really heavy emphasis on the drone aspect of it because it's trying to sort of induce this kind of hypnosis through this looping of usually a single like distorted sample of a commercial or whatever. That Chanel commercial, like talking about golden dreams and blue skies or something like that. So what I found by listening to I've just sampled a bunch of random signal wave artists. If you go on Bandcamp and look up the signal wave tag, there's tons of artists on there. And I've listened to mixes on YouTube. There's a fine line between this is haunting and beautiful and this is annoying the shit out of me. Like, I don't want to name names, but there are a lot of albums that I'm like, nope, this is just an irritating sound. I don't like this, because a lot of signal wave will introduce elements from like bad connections, like bad technical difficulties. Like it's sort of the thematic component of it. So hiss and static and like beeps from like various broadcast equipment are all sort of elements of the genre, and the wrong looping beep can get really annoying.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Or just like, this is just modem connection sounds which is, I don't know. Can be interesting. And like, I think there's a lot of inspiration probably from like horror films there and stuff. And like that type of abrasive stuff can work in those soundtracks, but it has to be like under something else. It can't be like, I'm going to fire up this album and just listen to modem. I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah. Signal wave is kind of one of those things you think, it's kind of like, abstract expressionism. In that it's, my kid could do that. Anyone could do this. This is easy. But when you listen to a lot of signal wave, you're like, boy, it is actually not easy to do, to actually create something really good with it. So,
yeah, and that's true of most genres. Kind of an aside, but like one of my least favorite forms of YouTube videos is like how to write a Taylor Swift song in 3 minutes. And it's like, okay, well then you should go do that.
Yeah. I mean, she makes a lot of money doing that. Yeah, I mean, those kind of things sort of reduce like pop songs and forgetting like the role that there's an entire team of very, very skilled specialists who understand music on a level that we cannot even comprehend, and they can master it so that it is, just a banger. Like just reading the behind the scenes shit of like what producers do to engineer a Taylor Swift song or whatever. It's just like, holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, I've even run into that on small scale in the past month because I got those little Korg synthesizers to play around with. And like, you can get it to kind of sound pretty good and make some beat boops. But then like you throw it into a DAW and you're like, wait a minute, how do I actually make a song?
Yeah.
How do people do this? So
yeah, I've started watching some like stylophone like tutorials on how to do different things with the stylophone, and it's just like, oh, okay, you could do this, and you could do that. Oh shit, like goddamn, like technique is really hard to do, and so like yeah. So even simple sounding music is really hard to pull off. But like, if I was ever to make a vaporwave album, I would try Signal Wave, because I feel like a lot of Signal Wave strength is in the right curation of sampling, plunderphonic sampling, because that tells half the story if you can figure out a good list of samples to draw from and like what order they go in.
No, I agree. I think not only is that interesting to curate, because we both love to dig around like YouTube and video archives and stuff, but also like, it's probably the most aligned with what's interesting to me. Yeah. About making the type of stuff overall.
Totally unrelated. But this morning, I did have a thought of, you mentioned Mallsoft a minute ago, and I realized maybe this album already exists, but I haven't seen it. Mallsoft album set at a gym, and it's just the sounds of like vague, like distant butt rock being played, but also like the sounds of plates clanking and like people grunting and shit like that.
Like the slow hum of treadmills and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I know there's like some fitness type stuff, but I think it tends to be more like ironic mocking of like 80s fitness type tapes, like Jane Fonda type aerobic tapes and stuff, but not like gym field recording.
Yeah, you're at a Planet Fitness at 11:30 at night on a Tuesday, because it's the only time you can get any exercise in, and this is what you have to eat. There's like you and 3 other dudes working out. Yeah, it's a massive. It's the size of the Walmart, but it's like one open space. So it's just like
unnecessarily reverby.
Yeah. That would be a fun. So yeah, Mallsoft artists, get on that.
Yeah, all you Mallsoft artists who listen to this, get on that.
Yeah, but yeah, Signal Wave, it's pretty cool. And when you can find really great albums, and I feel like both of today's albums are great.
I agree. That was the track Channel Scan, which is track 2 off our first album, Anik Telasat by CT57. This was one that I came across on the 2020 Up and Comers infographic, which was our
2022
January Patreon. 22. Oh my God. 2022. Sorry, my brain's been stuck in 2020 for so long now. The 2022 Up and Comers that we just did a Patreon bonus episode on. Check that out. So this is by CT57, which I couldn't find a whole lot about. I don't know if they're new or related to other projects. I assume it means Canadian television, Channel 57, probably, because they're listed as being from Toronto. I looked into them, and the Twitter account is also associated with Forgotten Signals Bandcamp, which has just a few tracks on it that are very similar to this. I don't know if they were like a prototype, came out around the same time as this album, and then is also connected to a label called TV Tapes that I don't think they put anything out yet, but they were collecting submissions. But the Bandcamp now says submissions are closed, so it might be something that is coming out soon. So definitely going to keep an eye on that. But definitely, if you look at that and the other Bandcamp projects, the kind of music they have on this album is definitely what they're interested in doing. So the album itself, the Anik, is a reference to the Anik, I don't know, series of satellites. They were communication satellites launched for Canadian television, basically, from the 70s, 1972, to the most recent one was 2013. So I'm just kind of assuming that the bit of this album is listening to broadcasts captured from those satellites.
Yeah, I also looked this up because, I want to know what the hell this was talking about. And the Wikipedia of it does mention that some of them have gone in the graveyard orbits because they're there. And they're like, holy shit, that's a cool ass term. I'm sure you've heard it before, but like for me, it's like, ooh, damn, I got to name something that like a, like it's a very good word, very good phrase.
Yeah, for sure. And because these satellites maybe only have 10, 15 year missions, just at which point you no longer have the fuel or desire to do orbital maintenance, or you just assume it'll be so broken that it can't run anymore. More famous example, something like Hubble, which has been running since the early 90s and was only supposed to last for a few years, but we kind of just kept it going. Partially because that stuff is over engineered because space is hard. And things... Space is hard and a lot of stuff can break up there. So you need a lot of redundancies, and that kind of works out in lasting a long time. But anyway, this album, going to the music, is interesting because, like I said in the intro, I'm so familiar with signal wave sampling being like ads, television samples. And this is none of that. It's a lot of like, almost like Fallout-y music. It's like old-timey.
Yes.
It's like old-timey sentimental swing. Yeah. And I was a little worried at first because the first two tracks, I'm like, what is happening here? What is this? Why is this so like easy listening music? Like what is happening? But it really grows on you because it is so different than what you're used to listening to.
Yeah, my notes begin like, what if the caretaker was in charge of a radio station on Fallout?
I thought you might say caretaker too, because it's a lot of that like swing, that
old
soft
style
trumpet, like muted trumpet swing and stuff. Yeah.
I think that's what this is the vibe that I got from the album. I mean, it really does capture for me like the essence of signal wave. Like it's a weird signal out of the ether. Yeah, no, it's just I love it. I listened to it several times. It's a very like I started playing this new game, Vampire Survivors, and I just mute the music and put this music on instead. And it was very good.
Nice.
To mow down hordes of enemies to this. So yeah, I would definitely mod this into a Half-Life or a Fallout game.
I'm sure that was the intent. Yeah, because I was trying to think about the sample set in the context of signal wave. And yeah, like I do love the idea that it is just lost transmissions from all these satellites. They're just out there. And they're just kind of, I don't know, wallying it up out there. Just
it's kind of
floating around.
It does this music, the Mallsoft kind of thing of like making you nostalgic for music you've actually never listened to before, because it sounds like that kind of music, like that easy. It's that easy listening music that we've all heard before. But by adding like the real key trait of this album is that lo-fi hiss. That's very prominent, especially if you listen to it with headphones or just with the volume really cranked up. That hiss is very prominent of like a bad connection, like there's a cable loose in your speakers or something like that. And it's amazing what that does to the. If this was like crystal clear, easy, if this was just the easy listening music, it would be boring. But like something about it, it's just a feat of auditory alchemy. That you can do that.
Yeah, and it is different, even though you said the caretaker, because a lot of the source music is the same. It is different because the caretaker is all about that like long, slow burn decay.
Yeah, this would be like the first album. This would be like before the decline.
Yeah, and the distortion of that tends to be more like simulation of listening to vinyl. Those kind of pops and scratches and stuff. That's little minor details, but yeah, it's that same type of music if you're familiar with them. But what I was thinking about what this type of music reminded me of is it felt very much like the end of the day music, like back in the over the air days before just 24-hour cable. Stations would wind down their broadcast. They would just start playing like mellow stuff. You know, like when he like falls asleep to the TV and like Poltergeist and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I think they're playing like trumpet fanfare because it's America. But I can imagine this kind of being like what you kind of wake up to playing because you fell asleep watching Johnny Carson in 1978 or the Canadian equivalent. And you just wake up and this is what's playing. There's like a test pattern and they're like, the broadcast is ending soon, especially long tracks. So like one track that really caught me off guard was Endless Orbit, which I'll play a sample from now. So I guess I was not expecting this album to have a 17-minute like jazz clarinet jam, almost 18 minutes. And
it's like half the album.
It just kind of is going. Yeah. It's half the album. It's called, like I said, Endless Orbit, track 5. And yeah, it just goes. And I was just listening. I'm like, wait a minute, are we still doing this? Are we still doing this? And yeah, you're really just kind of trapped in like this. I don't know. It also reminds me a lot of like Overlook Hotel type stuff. Which I guess if I tied to other media, yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of goes.
Yeah. At some point I want to make like a mix of Signal Wave, just do a 6-hour thing. And this is definitely going to be on it because, this is such great music to just vibe to if you're playing like a game or just browsing or whatever. It's pleasant, but not like sentimental. There's like that hiss is so prominent. I do like I actually really like track 6, the technical difficulties, because it's so abrupt and shifting with the sounds of technical difficulties of actually the beeps and the boops. But it's brief, it's late in the album. And so it sort of pulls us out of that like lull that, it's right after Endless Orbit. So yeah. And it's brief. It's only like a minute and a half. So yeah, I quite enjoy technical difficulties as like a little a little change of pace, which again shows like the value of just knowing what samples and what order to put them in terms of making a good Signal Wave album.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about next is both the technical difficulties track you mentioned, because it makes sense, especially going back to the theming of the satellites, which some of them, like you said, Space is Hard. I'm pretty sure some of them had a few catastrophic failures, which you finally get to hit in the album. But they also do this on the last track, Final Broadcast, where over the course of this kind of 6-minute track, it gets more and more distorted and worse until it kind of cuts out. So it's like kind of this last fading or failing transmission. And that's the last bit you get from these satellites.
Yeah.
So stuff like that little bit of extra thematic design kind of keeps it from just being a bunch of like weird old samples, because it is interesting. Like the Fallout Connection is sort of said in jest, but they're both tying into, like you said, some nostalgia for a time that never really existed. Because that sort of like wah, 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 muted trumpet type stuff has become in some weird way like a signifier for simpler times. And I don't know why or how, like the actual, I don't know, if you were to trace the like genealogy of of that, where that comes from, like who did it first.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is kind of like second or even third hand. I mean, I think like there's a lot of people our age and younger, like there's fucking Gen Z or Zoomers who are listening to like stuff that they heard from Fallout, like the ink spots, music from the 30s and 40s. And they love that because of like they played, 100 hours of Fallout, and they were I think a lot of that is like media creators who create, media to them, which was like representing old and like the decaying order and sort of nostalgic. Well, not even like personally nostalgic. If people made Fallout probably did not grow up with that music. Their parents did. And so they put it in there as like, oh, it's a weird, unfamiliar thing. And we're going to make this weird dystopian post-nuclear hellscape game. And then like, another 30 years later, like teenagers like, oh man, ink spots rule. This is great. And so I think it's the same kind of phenomenon of people like, I mean, people find out about shit from The Simpsons. They think it originates in The Simpsons, it's the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think don't have enough time on this episode to really fully flesh this thought out, but I do think there's like a little bit of like rejection of your current condition in it, because another fairly popular genre of YouTube videos are people who do, I know there's some fans of them, in my opinion, pretty lazy, like swing covers of modern pop songs. Yeah. And like, they're not even like doing an interesting rearrangement or anything. They're just kind of like playing the same song, but on different instruments. And people are like, this is great. So I told you pop is trash. If it was written like this, I would love it. I'm like, it's the same fucking music, man. Like, it's just one is somehow coded as like sophisticated, and I don't know. It's a little rambly, but there's something there that drives me nuts about.
It's definitely something
like just really lazy. Like, yeah.
It's definitely something we should interrogate in a future episode.
Yeah. I think there's something in there. We've talked about doing like a perception of time type stuff, and like,
end of history, baby.
End of history, baby. And that's the end of this segment.
The opening of The Labyrinth, track 1 of Exit Simulation by Infinity Frequencies. Yay! The artist that got me into Vaporwave more than any other artist. And they've released a new album January 7th of this year, 2022. And they still got it. Thank God. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, I've listened to a bunch of other Signal Wave trying to recapture that magic of Infinity Frequencies, but nothing else really clicked. And to be fair, I haven't like dug a whole lot. I would listen to like part of a mix or a couple albums here and there, and they wouldn't click. And I was like, I'd get discouraged, but the first track alone just literally sent chills up my spine. It's so haunting and hypnotic. And I was listening to it on YouTube. Vapor Memory uploaded the entire album. And it's a short album too. This is like, 27 minutes and 32 seconds for the entire album. And people are commenting on how like this album feels exactly how I feel right now. Everything feels so weird in the world, eerie and quiet. And this somehow captured the feeling in the current perfectly. And we have no idea where we're going, and we're basically just going in blind. Everything just feels really weird off. Yeah. And like, that's this, the post-lockdown malaise when one remembers the good old days, but that was only 22 months ago, but it feels like 22 decades ago. And it's amazing that like, the Infinity Frequencies is really masterful at figuring out what samples and what order to put them in, what level of distortion. Like they're just off enough that it's not crystal, and these simple loops, they're all pretty short tracks. Yeah, it really resonated with me, and I loved it, as you might tell.
I love this album too. Fun fact, first of all, I think this is the first album released in 2022 that we're doing. So congratulations, Infinity Frequencies. Yay. You coming with us into yet another nightmare year. Sorry, maybe not. It's not off to a good start.
Yeah.
But so listening to this album, when we first started, I thought it was interesting that the first few tracks are the production's very different. In some ways, maybe a little bit better, but like the first few tracks are very similar to what's on Anik Telesat, which is like old timey, sentimental, like somber, classical type music. I don't know what the exact samples are.
Yeah,
but they are that sort of languid, ballady type stuff. And then just like procedurally generated corridor just comes in with like this fucking like down tempo, but really catchy little funk synth piece. And there's this whole switch in mood. And that's really the whole album, is that it's like this weird schizophrenic, like back and forth of like a few, not as a criticism, but like a few tracks that are these quiet little old timey pieces. And then like all of a sudden, you know, you have like these just kind of like Carpenter synth arpeggios, and then Neural Interface is like boss music, synth guitar. And it's like, what's happening? Yeah. And, you know, just the random tracks, you know, you could just pick out like almost any track randomly, and there's something interesting about it. And, you know, my thoughts were like, if this were any other band or genre, this would feel like the most unfocused and confused album. But for this band and for this genre, it's perfect, because I think, like you were just saying, these are very confused and unfocused times. And to me, it was, you know, I think Telesat's a little bit more like kind of channel surfing late at night, like end of broadcast kind of stuff I said. And this is much more of like the way in which I sort of feel constantly bombarded by information of varying degrees of real or perceived severity. And yeah, and you just kind of feel like you never know what to expect next. And that's maybe a little too close to being alive in 2022 for me, but makes for a great goddamn album.
Yeah, no, it does. It's true. I think part of it is that there's never like, there's certainly changes. Like here, let's just play another sample. From track 8, which is called The First Night. And I feel like that's a little more like, more energetic, a little more varied, a bit. But I think, like there's never a sound that like, again, annoyed me, which I think for me, at least, is the key of Signal Wave. So many Signal Wave artists make a sound that is so harsh and dissonant that it like pulls me out. And it's like, that's just unpleasant to listen to. Everything in here is like, Infinity Frequency's thing is to like establish like this loop, this sample, and just play it several times with subtle variations, and then move on to the next track, which is a different sample or a sample source. The YouTube version only lists one sampled song. They only identified one song, which I listened to and couldn't really identify, and it's from no one I've heard of before, but it's the Hall of the Stairs from Andreas Vollenweider from the album White Winds, Seeker's Journey. So yeah, I have no idea. But you get back even later in the album, it slows down again. Like, let's just play our third sample. is from the title track, Exit Simulation, track 13. Yeah, again, I just keep coming back to the idea of this like hypnotic music. Like it is very much trying to alter your state of consciousness.
Yes. The track just before this one, I thought was the same way, A Secret Gathering, which is very similar in that it's kind of like these repetitive synth piano type deal, but it's much higher pitch. I just wrote it sounds like some Columbo shit because it does sound like a lot of it sounds like mystery show music or like the early 70s Columbo when they just had weird soundtracks. Yeah. But yeah, I think hypnotic is like a really good way of putting it. A lot of stuff is just so interesting to listen to. So like my other kind of track shout out was I really liked, I don't know exactly what they are, but whatever sort of percussive bells they were using on track 9, Anomaly. They're like church bells or some large percussive bell. Yeah. That's kind of, but they're kind of like detuned. Yeah. They're very slightly out of tune. I don't know why. Like I really liked that track.
Yeah. This album is a breeze to get through. I listened to it multiple times. It was hard for me to take notes on individual tracks because by the time I got into a track, the album moved on. So I had to listen back several times, but I didn't mind. Like, it's just, God, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that Infinity Frequency still has it. They still got it, whatever it is. Yeah. Because they have not released they only release an album, it seems like every couple of years.
Yeah. The last one was what, like 2018, 2017?
Yeah, 2018.
Something like that.
And then before that, 2016. So yeah, it takes a couple of years to really find the.
I think that's good. Yeah, some things you just got to take your time with to make them better. Like, I like a lot of stuff that comes out, but also when an artist just releases something every 4 weeks, it's like, are you prolific or not putting much thought into this?
Yeah.
And like, maybe it happens to work out just because like the source material is interesting or some cases, it's better for me as like a passive listener while working. But this is not really like, it can be, but it doesn't have to be like a passive listening album, which is interesting because it does kind of follow the Signal Wave goal of, doesn't try to be like catchy or listenable. Like parts of it are, but that's clearly not the goal. It's not the same as like future funk or vaporwave where like you kind of pick like stuff with a good beat or like a catchy hook and kind of emphasize that hook in some way through Plunderphonics. It's very different.
There's a comment on the Bandcamp, one of the Bandcamp listeners says, "Damn, this is a perfect balance between coldness and sentimentality." And I think that's sort of the key there. I mean, for a lot of vaporwave too, at least for me, is like to have that duality between comfort and anxiety, and this really does hit that balance. It seems like there's this anxious, like this weirdness to it. There's this dissonance to it. But then on the other hand, it's pleasant. It's also nice. So like, and it's sort of, irresolvable. It's unresolvable. Like it's just, well, we can't really decide what this album is. It is on the knife's edge between the two sentiments. And that's why it is something you should listen to. So yeah, I mean, just listen to it. It's not even half an hour.
Really getting into the length of albums is a pitch tactic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, some of the episodes were like, here's a 2-hour album. I'm like, yeah.
But those are some good ones.
Yeah, there are some good ones too.
But they do require work.
They do require work.
Thanks so much for listening. This is fun to dive into a genre like I said, that I think we're getting to a little bit late because I do think in both of our interests, it's a real cornerstone. So I had fun discussing it with you. Finally, I think it just lucked out that it just happened to be at a time when there are two great new Signal Wave albums. So
we'll have to do more this year just to sort of catch up, but also because I feel like there's got to be other great signal wave artists. We just haven't found them yet.
Oh, sure. I just assume there's so much good stuff out there that any lack of awareness is just my fault. In a way, like there's just not enough time to consume everything, which is why like people sending recs is so important because kind of like collectively we can all listen to stuff together. But for our next episode, this is actually kind of a suggested topic. This sort of came up on our Patreon Discord where a user was talking about it. We're going to do some post-rock and horror. So we're both huge fans of post-rock. You know, we did the Godspeed the Black Emperor episode. Just generally, we've talked about liking that aesthetic, and we both love horror movies. And I think it came up on the Discord that they're fairly connected in like tone and style. So going to do some thinking about that and get into that topic.
Yeah. I know. I mean, for me, of course, post-rock, I immediately think of not like horror movies, but sort of like dark, dramatic movies like, I don't know, Sorcerer and movies like that.
Well, I figured you were going to say 20 Days Later, which is a literal horror movie and where you discovered post-rock.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. That is the obvious thing. But, you know, I like mentioning Sorcerer whenever possible because
you mention Sorcerer whenever possible.
Yeah, especially because I know there's one listener out there who really loves when I talk about Sorcerer, the movie.
Yeah. But again, thanks so much for listening. If you want to listen to more of our episodes or just join this Discord and recommend episodes yourself, we have a Patreon at Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. You can also find us at Night Clerk Radio pretty much anywhere. Twitter, we have a website, Facebook, anywhere fine podcasts are advertised and sold. Wherever you do choose to interact with us, we always ask that you just take a moment to rate, review, click a thumbs up, whatever dumb algorithm shit that site has that tells them that you like what we do. Just take 5 seconds and click it. And of course, there's also word of mouth. Tell people, tell friends, tell enemies, tell frenemies.
Frenemies, yeah.
All right. That being said, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Bye.